This episode is sponsored by FX's Kindred, the original series only on Hulu. Based on Octavia E. Butler's best-selling novel, FX's Kindred centers on Dana James, a young Black woman and aspiring writer. Dana begins to settle into her new home in Los Angeles and is violently pulled back and forth in time. She emerges at a 19th century plantation and is confronted with secrets she never knew ran through her blood. FX's Kindred, all episodes now streaming only on Hulu.
Today on CityCast Denver. It's been less than a month since 5 people were killed and 22 were injured in a mass shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs. And while the breaking news alerts have faded, the narrative about Colorado Springs remains, that it's a conservative religious stronghold, one that's not welcoming to the LGBTQ community. But that's changing, in part thanks to Steph Vigil, a progressive Democrat recently elected to House District 16, a seat that had long been held by Republicans. Today is Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. I'm Bree Davies, and this is CityCast Denver. Representative-elect Steph Vigil, Club Q is in the district you'll be representing at the legislature starting in January. Tell me how you're feeling about all of this right now.
Yeah, well, it really threw my identity into the spotlight in a way I hadn't planned on, which was not the curveball, obviously, that I was imagining before I even have a chance to get sworn in. I wasn't shy or secretive about it, if anyone cared or noticed in the course of my election, but I am a gender fluid person. I don't consider myself fully all woman, if that makes sense. But I also didn't go around telling people hey, that's a reason you should vote for me, or making a huge, huge deal out of it. But all of a sudden here we've got, an attack on the LGBTQ community. And I think it matters that we have increased representation in our state legislature.
Yeah. So tell me about what brought you to Colorado Springs, because I know you've been there for a while. How have you seen the city change?
So I first came here in 1999 with my family. I grew up in a religious fundamentalist home. They wanted to be part of New Life Church. It was a lot of the reason we came here. So I was in that community for a little bit. Yeah.
New Life. This is like Pastor Ted Haggard's church.
Yep. Absolutely. And being in that program was sort of like the beginning of my deconversion process of I don't think I want to be part of this religion. It's not who I want to be. So I, stayed here until about my mid-20s. I moved to Chicago for a while, and then I moved back in 2015. And in the intervening time, just since I've been back the last, 7 years, we've been through a lot of growth. And I don't just mean obviously new population, new development. No, obviously with many waves of growth in Colorado Springs over the years and the whole state of Colorado. But I think just culturally and as far as our diversity as a community as well, it's gotten a lot better. And also there's still this contingent here of folks who think that the right way to be a Coloradan and the right way for the city to be is their way and only their way. And I don't think it's actually the core of our city's identity. It's not the kind of city we were founded to be. It's not the kind of city we've always been. It's still a relatively new phenomenon, the, religious authoritarian presence. And I think they're getting very angry that the city is not being run by that angry minority anymore. Politically, it still very much is. They've lost some ground, and they've definitely lost some ground culturally. And so there's been a backlash. And It's sad how much the morning that I woke up and saw the news about this, I was not surprised. I mean, appalled, very angry, but we've been warning for a while. You keep saying things like this and enabling people to be violent, and eventually somebody's going to do something.
So you're a person that grew up in a fundamentalist church community, which has a pretty pronounced presence in Colorado Springs. But at the same time, you're also talking about this city that's incredibly diverse and not represented by this religious establishment. Yeah. I wonder, can you talk about that battle that's sort of playing out in Colorado Springs in terms of how the politics is working versus what's actually happening in your communities?
Yeah, well, and Bree, we actually have always had in this city a proud, creative, loving, community-oriented resistance to the political establishment. It's always been here. I'm very much of the mindset that like our fair city deserves better. It deserves better representation, which is so much of the reason that I ran. And I'm very proud of our win. We worked really, really hard for it. It's a big shift forward for us as a community to pick up a new seat for a Democrat and a progressive. And, just every step of the way, I've always felt like if there's anything you want to do in Colorado Springs that is, especially if it's creative or forward thinking or innovative in any way, you can always find a community for it. And I've experienced this with music, art, small business, obviously political action. We have actually a really good core of community-oriented folks here who are always down to do something collaborative and something constructive. And we just need to lean into it more, I think, and not let this dominating narrative take us over that somehow, focus on the family runs Colorado Springs. No, they don't. No, they don't. They're here. They can do whatever they're going to do. They don't control my family. They don't control, my little sector of our community. We're still here. We've always been here.
Well, and I have to say, you're touching on why I wanted to talk to you. After the Club Q shooting, you shared some very raw sentiment on Twitter about this very crux of this problem, which is there's a narrative about Colorado Springs coming from folks outside the city, especially folks in media, people like me, who see the military presence, but also that presence, like you said, a focus on the family and this like very pervasive, their anti-gay rhetoric. But I just, what are we outside of your community getting wrong about what Colorado Springs really is to you?
Yeah. Well, here's the big thing about like the mega churches and organizations like, Focus. And by the way, like they're just kind of the most obvious one. There's a whole network of, I think they used to call them like parachurch organizations, which includes like Compassion International, the International Bible Association, Cook Ministries. There's a bunch of them. And they do have a lot of headquarters here. They're kind of all in the same part of town. And also they're relatively new in the grand scheme of things. They all started showing up in like the early 90s, which is around the time that, right, we got that amendment to the hate state distinction that we got hit with. I say I actually wasn't even here yet. But think about that. That's like 30-ish years. The city is so much older than that. The city is also home to Fannie Mae Duncan, who opened the Cotton Club. It was one of the only jazz clubs in the country that you could go to that was fully integrated because she just rejected Jim Crow and opened it up to everyone. Catherine Lee Bates wrote America the Beautiful from the top of Pikes Peak, looking out over Colorado Springs while attending Colorado College, right? Tesla had a lab here for a while. We have a lot of other bright spots in our city, and fundamentally it was founded by General Palmer to be a healthy place, a healthy, welcoming, tranquil place that you could come to if you were unwell, especially for tuberculosis. And because we're part of the American West, this is a frontier environment. You don't come here for people to control how you live. You come here to escape that kind of oppression and start a new life. And to me, like, that's who we are as a city. Why is that not the narrative that we tell about ourselves? It should be. Those dark pockets that we have, everybody's got those. Our charge is to deal with them and confront them and not to let our worst news stories become everything that we think about ourselves.
This episode is brought to you by the How to Buy a Home podcast. Because for the first time in 5 years, there's a house in my neighborhood for sale for $300,000. That's nuts. And that's just a sneak preview of 2023, which could be the year of the first-time homebuyer. A lot of people are predicting a recession, and that could mean buyers have more power, less cutthroat competition, and more homes on the market that could get more affordable. If you haven't listened to the How to Buy a Home podcast, now is the perfect time. Host David Sidoni is an industry expert who has helped thousands of people just like you all over North America buy their first homes. Since 2005, David has been the undisputed first-time homebuyer authority. His How to Buy a Home podcast has helped so many listeners close on houses they thought were impossible, even as things went nuts in the past couple of years. Start planning this holiday season at howtobuyahome.com and make this the last year you rent. Find How to Buy a Home on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's no ordinary political podcast.
I want this to be a fun, informative way for people to find out the latest and greatest in Georgia political news.
Politically Georgia, from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
We want to take people inside the deals, inside the decisions.
Political insiders Greg Bluestein and Patricia Murphy lead the AJC's team of journalists at the legislature and Washington.
For the nation, Georgia could really set the tone on so many different issues.
We want to make it easy and fun to listen and learn about politics.
Know what's really going on with Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Listen every Wednesday and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts.
So you kind of tweeted something about this. You said we're presently caught in a paradox in Colorado Springs. We have a problem with bigotry here. It's real. It's also not the core of who we are as a city. And we absolutely can't afford to resign ourselves to it. What is that? What is that paradox? And what are you concerned about folks resigning themselves to?
Yeah, well, like I said, that we have those folks here. They have a lot of presence. They have a lot of political power, to be sure. And also, again, not the kind of city we were founded to be, and not ultimately what we're made of. And certainly there are a lot of, like I said, a lot of pockets that are very artistic and creative and diverse and welcoming to all different kinds of people. If Focus on the Family packed up and left town and most of the rest of that network left with them tomorrow, if they all just left, that would actually be a return to normalcy for Colorado Springs. Because, again, those folks have only been here since the early 90s, like really here and established and, taken up a lot of the oxygen. Somehow, though we've got it in our heads that this is just how it is here and it's never going to change. Like it already is a change. It's a change from how the city used to be. So you got to have some room in your imagination for what your town is going to be like, because this is still a young city and a young state in the American West. There's no law that says we have to be run by whoever has the most money and is taking up the most airtime right now. And if we allow them to do that, we're ceding control, and it matters because we're not talking about like a liberal-minded, diverse political establishment. We're talking about a very particular worldview that is hostile to others, that is taking up the political establishment right now. And I don't think we should allow that. Turn up the volume. Let's turn up the volume on the good parts of us as well. Because I think for people who are really intolerant and bigoted about these things, and I speak very frankly about it, I don't. They're just being bigoted. It's not a religious freedom issue because no one's telling them they have to do anything. They're imposing it on us.
So something else I'm thinking about is often what happens in marginalized communities is the burden falls on the community itself to do all the work. And you're a legislator, you're a legislative elect who is representing the LGBTQ community. But what do you expect or hope from your fellow legislators who maybe don't identify with your community?
Yeah, I have to say, I'm so glad you brought this up because it gives me an opportunity to praise my colleagues a little bit. As a brand new rep-elect in the Democratic caucus of the House, and by the way, we have the largest caucus we've ever had. We also have the largest LGBTQ caucus in our state legislature that we've ever had. Right away, I found that I was super well resourced and supported by our caucus leadership, by my fellow newbies and incumbent members. Everybody kind of just was like, "Oh, what can we do to help support all of you?" And that included a few of my colleagues coming down to attend a vigil at one of the churches here, which was nice because I had the opportunity to kind of show them the Colorado Springs I know, which, is more like white blood cells rushing to a wound than anything else. My colleagues really proved themselves to be supportive, collaborative, compassionate folks that we're here for each other when our communities are in need. So I really look forward to continuing to expect that kind of support, in the same way that it shouldn't be up to communities of color to fight for their rights alone when there's oppression going on. And it shouldn't be up to folks with disabilities to fight for themselves alone when they're not being accommodated and treated well. It's all of us or none of us, right? We're going to rise together or fall together as a society. That's how this works.
Well, Representative-elect Steph Vigil, thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate you making some time to include a voice from our community, Colorado Springs and our LGBTQ folks here.
And here's what else Denverites are talking about: a billionaire and his cheese empire. The Denver Post reports that last week, a jury ruled that James Loprino of Colorado's Loprino Foods would not have to pay two of his nieces $900 million after they say they were pushed out of the company following a family dispute. Chances are you've had a taste of the Loprino Foods dynasty. The company is the largest producer of mozzarella in the world and supplies the shredded delight to the country's biggest pizza chains. And finally, how far would you drive for a soak? What's your favorite hot springs destination? If you've got a particular thermal pool you like to visit in Colorado, tell us about it. Call our Hot Springs hotline at 720-500-5418 and give us your best recs. Leave us a voicemail with your name, neighborhood, and preferred mineral pool, and you might hear it on the show. That number again is 720-500-5418. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell the cheesehead in your life about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter, Hey Denver, by texting Denver to 66866. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya! And it's like, I love that kind of cheese too, but it's not like it's like finely aged cheese. It's like factory cheese, which is my favorite as well. I mean, I love a nice aged. I literally had the world's best blue cheese at a wedding I went to this summer at the winery. Like, they brought it out. They were like, this has been awarded the world's best blue cheese award. And it was insane. It was so good. But I will also eat American cheese any day. I don't care.